Hi everyone, welcome back to Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in the month of May. Welcome to my May wrap-up. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. My name's Alice and I have way too many books. And today I am talking about the books that I read in May. It was a very productive month of reading overall. I read quite a lot of books and yeah, let's get straight into it. So the stats first of all, I read 16 books, 4 of them were audiobooks, 1 of them was an ebook, and 5 were library books and 6 were from the Giant TBR, so not bad. I did buy 1 book, but I'm already reading it at the moment, so we will check in on how that will affect the Giant TBR at the end. There were 4 books that I carried on from May. One was The Floating Admiral by the Detection Club, which includes Agatha Christie. I bought this one this month because I found it in a charity shop for £2, and it's a really, really lovely hardback edition, so I bought this. I started reading it in May, so it doesn't need to add to the TBR, and I am about a third of the way through this one. I also started the Six Tudor Queens series, Katherine of Aragon, the True Queen by Alison Weir, for the Tudoralong. This is run by Dani at Dani's Book World, Gemma at Gemma Books, and Emily at Novelle Novels, so do go and check out those 3 lovely ladies' channels in the description down below. I only barely started this. I started chapter 1 and I got distracted with other reads, so I'll be reading the majority of this in June. Of course, we still have Dunn, but the least we mention him the better. I didn't actually make any progress with him in May, so I will be trying my best to read some in June. I did carry on 1 more book, but I have already DNF'd it as of yesterday, the 1st of June. So I will talk about that one probably in my June wrap up, but it was also a book for the Women's Prize, which I'm going to be talking about live on my channel with Gemma from Gemma Books, and that live will be coming up soon, so look out for that one. And yeah, we'll chat about that book then. This was also a month where I had 3 5-star reads, so that is absolutely amazing. Really, really, really pleased with some of the books that I read this month. I also did read some sort of mediocre books, but nothing was a terrible book. If you're new here, I usually, in my wrap-ups, do the good books, then the very good books, and then my favourites of the month. So I basically go through them roughly in order of how much I enjoyed them. I'm filming on the Queen's birthday. Here in the UK we've got a 4-day weekend for Queen Elizabeth's 70 years on the throne, her Platinum Jubilee, so I thought I would celebrate that in the background today. And I also have a lovely book that I won on Instagram from the lovely Graham Sillars Reads Books. So let's get straight into the good books. Let's start with A Study in Sherlock. This was by far my least favourite read of the month, unfortunately. This is a short story collection of stories inspired by the Holmes canon, and they were all by different authors, and I find with short story collections with multiple different authors you do get a very mixed bag. And the authors that I already like, I did enjoy their stories. I thought the best story in here was the one by Neil Gaiman, The Case of Death and Honey. That was really, really good. I quite enjoyed the one by Lee Child called The Boneheaded League. And there were a few other good stories in this one. There were also some really weak stories that were quite a slog, or that just appeared to have absolutely nothing to do with Sherlock Holmes to me. My other favourite in this one was The Case of the Unwritten Short Story. But I think this was by Steve Cotterill, and it was an illustrated one, which I really enjoyed. So yeah, mixed bag on that one. Next up we have The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. I spoke about this in my first wrap up of this month, and this was fine for a thriller, just didn't wow me that much, but didn't do anything particularly wrong either. So that was in my good reads of the month. Don't have this one to show, but I also read The Comfort Book by Matt Haig. I felt like this was a book that I should have probably enjoyed a lot more, I found a lot more comforting, but didn't really do a lot for me. I felt that a lot of what it was trying to do, I enjoyed more in the book The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse. But yeah, I think this could be a very comforting book to a lot of people. So it's basically a book full of different little bits of life advice and things that cheer Matt Haig up. So it was quite enjoyable. It just wasn't my favourite. Next up, Anne's House of Dreams. This was the latest of the Anne of Green Gables series that I've read. I've been reading these all year with the Readalong, hosted by Emily at Novel Novels. And I believe this one is the 5th book, and for me this series has gone really a lot downhill. Unfortunately, although I hope to like this one better, I did like it better than last month's book, but I didn't love it. What I feel about this series now is that the focus has gone away from Anne, and Ellen Montgomery writes a lot of different new characters into these books, and it's not really them that we care about. We care about, or I care about, the characters that we met initially. And I felt like, despite Anne's name being on the cover, I felt like Anne was a bit of a passenger in this story, to be honest. I don't think she really came into her own very much, which was a shame. The writing by Ellen Montgomery is still beautiful. I love the way she writes about nature, so I will continue with this series, but I do think it's kind of run its course for me now, to be honest. Next up is a book I listened to, The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. I listened to this because it won the Goodreads Award for Best Thriller last year. Personally, for me, this was a thriller that didn't do a lot for me. I thought that most of the things that happened in this have kind of been done before, to be honest. It was a reasonably good listen. I didn't dislike anything about it. I just didn't really love anything about it either. This is the story of a woman whose husband disappears, and he sends her a note. His last words to her are "protect her," and this is referring to his daughter Bailey. Hannah, the woman, does her best to find out what's happened to Owen and to protect Bailey at all costs, basically. And I thought, personally for me, this was a bit of an unsatisfying thriller. It kind of went back and forward in time, with Hannah having flashbacks to like previous events with her husband, and of course the husband had a big backstory that we eventually found out, but it wasn't really my cup of tea. I certainly would not have voted it as top thriller of last year, unless there were no other good thrillers last year, maybe. The last one in my good category is Unnatural Death by Dorothy L. Sayers. I still don't really think the Lord Peter Wimsey series has come into its own for me. This is the 3rd book I've read, and it's the 3rd book in the series. I've heard these get good later in the series when other characters arrive. This one did get good about halfway through, 2/3 of the way through. It did start to pick up the pace a bit, but I find the slow build in these Lord Peter Wimsey mysteries a bit too slow. So, I mean, this was a good mystery. It's all about Lord Peter Wimsey trying to find a murderer of a woman that they're not even sure has actually been murdered, an old lady who was probably dying anyway. So, but he insists that he thinks there's something suspicious. So that's how this book goes on, basically. And I did enjoy it in the end, but it didn't do a lot for me. So yeah, kind of a good read, but not great. So into my very good books. I buddy read this one with Berna at Berna's Bookish Adventures, and I absolutely love buddy reading with Berna. It's our second buddy read together, and had another great time on this, because I think Berna and I have very similar opinions on books, or we do, on the books we've read together so far. And this one was another short story collection. I meant to say that I was reading short story collections for Short Reads 2022, which was hosted by Mitzi Reads and Writes, Chantel Reads All Day, and What Brings Corina Joy. And It was lovely to be encouraged to read short story collections, and I did read 3 over the course of the month. So Don't Look Now and Other Stories by Daphne du Maurier was actually the 3rd one I finished, and this one, unlike the other one, is obviously a short story collection by one author, which is what I tend to prefer. Again, this was a little bit of a mixed bag. The title story, Don't Look Now, is really, really good. Quite similar to the film of the same name. Obviously the film was based on this short story, but yeah, I really did enjoy that one. There were a couple of others that I enjoyed, but they had strange endings, or I didn't really understand the ending necessarily. So Not After Midnight, A Borderline Case, and The Breakthrough. I liked all of those, but I felt that all of the endings were either a bit strange or left me a little bit confused. But yeah, they were still good short stories. The one I didn't like was The Way of the Cross, which had this cast of characters, multiple characters, they were introduced as like a tour group, and they were introduced in just the way that Agatha Christie does so well in the build-up of her murder mysteries. But then there was no murder. It was just a sort of straightforward story about people visiting the Holy Land. For me, this story didn't really have enough in it to make it much of a story. But yeah, overall a good collection, and I have put this into my very good category because I really, really did enjoy the opening short story set in Venice and very, very uneasy making. So yeah, that was a very good collection. Next up, we have The Shining, which I read with AJ Dunn's Killer Reads Thriller Month Book Club, which is reading the top 60 thrillers according to Penguin. And this was my favourite thriller so far, I think, that we've read, because I was really expecting this to be more of a horror, but it actually did for me what a really good thriller does, which is makes you not want to put it down. It did really make me keep reading, and I really liked the characters in this. So a great book. I've already talked about this elsewhere. Coming on to a book for the Women's Prize, Ruth Ozeki's The Book of Form and Emptiness. This was one of the Women's Prize books that I was really looking forward to reading, based on having read the blurb for the BookTube Prize. And yeah, Ruth Ozeki. I have never read Ruth Ozeki before. This is the story of Benny, who starts to hear voices after the death of his father, and the voices tend to be things around him that are talking to him in some way or make noises. They don't exactly talk to him. Benny and his mother are really struggling with grief, and Benny's mother sort of channels her grief into hoarding. And Benny finds the house therefore a bit unbearable because a lot of the things she's hoarding make noise and speak to him. So Benny finds refuge in the library. I love a book with a library in, and I thought that this was a really, really good read. I didn't think it was absolutely one of the best that I've read for the Women's Prize, which is strange because it had a library and it had very good points to it. And I did read the majority of this book in a day. Yeah, I did really, really enjoy this. It's a little bit out there for me, and the style of writing was not maybe as easy to read at some points as some of the other books on the Women's Prize shortlist. But I really did enjoy The Book of Form and Emptiness. I'm glad I've read this, and even though it is a chunky book, it is a really enjoyable read. Yeah, there's a lot of really, really good stuff in this, and I have been thinking about it since, so always a sign of a good book. I've also already talked about this one, No Middle Name by Lee Child, and this was the first short story collection I read this month, and I really, really liked it. I always like visiting Jack Reacher, even for a short story. This was a lovely find in the library. So I was looking in the sort of memoir poetry section and found this lovely little book called The Bucket by Alan Orberg, Memories of an Inattentive Childhood. Now, as you will know, Alan Orberg is one of my absolute favourite children's authors of all time, and I think he just writes wonderful books. And this book took me back to some of his best books. There are some extracts from some of his books and some pictures from some of his books in this, and I just loved his voice in this. It's a series of short memories of his childhood, and I found this absolutely fascinating, and I read this in pretty much one sitting, probably 2 sittings, because it's only about 120, 130 pages long. So I would highly, highly recommend finding a copy of this book if you loved Alan Orberg's picture books, poetry as a child. There's some lovely poems in here which I really, really enjoyed, but there's also a lot of sort of lovely memoir, non-fiction writing, but a series of short pieces of writing. It's absolutely lovely, really, really good book. Probably would have given this 5 stars if it wasn't for the fact that it was so short. I would have liked even more. But yeah, it gave me a very, very happy couple of hours. A beautiful, beautiful book. Next up, one I don't have to hold up, is Things I Have Withheld by Kai Miller. If you are following Gemma, a Gemma Books channel, she did a full review of this the other day on her channel because she loved it so much, and I highly, highly recommend you go and check that out if you want to know a really in-depth view of the book Things That I Have Withheld by Kai Miller, which was shortlisted for the Jubilee Prize this year, but sadly it didn't win. So this is an essay collection by Kai Miller, and as the title suggests, it's about things that he hasn't spoken out about until now, and I really loved the mixture of different essays that was in this. And, you know, some of them were really, really moving. He talks a lot about race and his culture being from Jamaica, and he just talks really brilliantly about all the things that he talks about, and he is very poetic in the way he writes. I believe he is a published poet, and I will definitely be looking for more of Kai Miller's work because this was a really, really interesting collection to read, and I highly recommend that you read it, but I also highly recommend that you check out Gemma's review to know a little bit more about it, because she worded it a lot better than I have. Finally, in my very good category, we come to Bring Up the Bodies by Hilary Mantel. I think I talked about this in my first half of the month wrap up, and I really, really enjoyed this second instalment of Hilary Mantel's Cromwell series, and yeah, I think it's a really, really good read. I enjoyed this one more than Wolf Hall. This one kind of deals with the events leading up to Anne Boleyn's death, and yeah, it was really, really interesting to see that from the point of view of Thomas Cromwell, who I really, really enjoy as a character. As I've said in my TBR, I don't think I'm going to jump straight into The Mirror and the Light, the third book, but that isn't because I'm not enjoying the series, it's because I think it will be quite taxing and it's very large, so I will be saving it for a little bit until I'm really, really in the mood for it. So, we have come to my favourites of the month, and actually looking back on it, I could have easily put The Bucket and Things That I Have Withheld into my favourites of the month. But I've saved my favourites of the month this month for my 3, yes that's right, 3 5-star reads this month, and bearing in mind before that I'd only had 2 5-star reads in the whole year, so May has been an amazing, amazing month for reading. So all of these were actually audiobooks, which is also quite weird. The first one is Fight Night, and this is by Miriam Taves. This is an ad PR product because I was given this for a read-along with Tandem and Faber Books, and I talk about this in depth in my first wrap-up of the month, so please do go and check that out. Fight Night was just a really brilliant book to listen to. I just absolutely loved that book. So that was my first 5-star of the month. My second 5-star of the month was Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead, which I listened to again as an audiobook, and I did this one as buddy read with Gemma from Gemma Books. And I did speak about this briefly in my previous wrap-up, but I hadn't actually finished wrapping it up with Gemma at the time, so I didn't go fully into it, but this is just a brilliant sort of sprawling epic of a story. It has a past timeline and a present timeline. The past is all about Marion Graves, who is a female aviator, and it takes in her whole life from like when she's literally a baby right up to when she goes missing while circumnavigating the globe in a great circle. There is also a modern day timeline following Hadley Baxter, an actress who is playing Marion in an upcoming film. And we also get a bit of Hadley's background. And yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and the two timelines come perfectly together in the end. If you wished for a book that tied everything up and just did a really great job of every little detail that you might have previously thought in the rest of the book was not relevant, every detail in Shipstead's book is relevant, I assure you. This is definitely a book that I can see why it is getting the hype. I think it justifies the hype. I've not only lent Fight Night to my mum, which is why I wasn't holding it up because I do have a hard copy, I've also convinced her to buy a copy of Great Circle and read it. So really hoping that she enjoys it as well. I would recommend it definitely to historical fiction lovers, because this takes in the war, it takes in a lot of sort of American history and includes a lot of history of aviators in general. Yeah, it really has a bit of everything in this book. I wouldn't call myself a historical fiction lover, but I really enjoyed the way Shipstead put this book together, and her writing was just really good. I will definitely seek out Shipstead's other books. I believe she has a short story collection out now, and I think she had a couple of previous novels. Yeah, 5 stars from me. Now, the third book, you will notice a theme here, also an audiobook, also a 5-star, and also on the Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist. And this book is Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason. I absolutely loved this book. So this book follows Martha. Martha has sort of ended her marriage with Patrick. Martha looks back into her past and takes us through basically her life history, but Martha's always suffered throughout her life from mental illness, but I thought that was really well done too. I was just really drawn in by Martha's story, and she has a very funny sister who I really enjoyed that character. I thought Patrick was a great character, her ex-husband, and yeah, I just, without spoiling the book, it's a really good read, and I liked being sort of in Martha's shoes for some time, but there are also times when you really feel for her. I really enjoyed the way Meg Mason had written this, and it's a really good look at a family life. It encompasses like her mum and dad's lives as well. We meet her aunties and uncles and cousins, and there's a really interesting family dynamic there, and they always go to the aunts for Christmas, and that's revisited throughout the book over many Christmases, and I really liked the way that was done as well. I don't really know what else to say about it without going into full spoilers, but I think that this is an absolutely fascinating look at a woman going through sort of family issues, going through a separation with a partner, and going through all of this through her lens of the way she views the world, and through her trying to come to terms with the idea that she is actually suffering a mental illness and that she isn't just a broken person. So I really enjoyed this one. I'm really glad I've now read 5 out of 6 of the Women's Prize books, because the 6th one I have just DNF'd yesterday. It's been a really interesting project to read all of the 6 shortlisted books, and as I say, there will be a live coming up soon, so keep an eye on mine and Gemma's channels for that. It's going to be here on my channel. We'll be discussing each of the books on the shortlist. We will be giving our ranking of the 6 books, and we will be predicting winners. So yeah, I'd love you to join us for that live, which should be coming up on hopefully the 11th of June, before obviously the announcement of the winner of the Women's Prize, which I'm really interested to see. But anyway, I have digressed completely. That was my wrap up of everything I read in the month of May. I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. What did you read in May? What was your favourite book of the month? Did you read any 5-star books? I'm really, really excited to have read 3 of my favourite books of the year this month. Finally, before we go, I almost forgot that we need to check in on the giant TBR. So if you've been following my channel for a while, you'll know that I've been counting down my giant TBR, trying to get it down this year to under 150 books. And at the end of last month, I believe I was on 186 books. I did read 6 books from the giant TBR. That was No Middle Name, Bring Up the Bodies, Anne's House of Dreams by L.M. Montgomery, Don't Look Now and Other Stories by A Study in Sherlock, and Unnatural Death. So that is 6 more books off the giant TBR, which brings us down to 180 books, which I'm really, really pleased about. So hopefully in June I'll be able to get the TBR down even further. If you've enjoyed this video today, please do give it a like. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already. I hope to see you all again soon for another video all about books here on Alice and the Giant Bookshelf.